Hello and welcome to this recorded training session. This session will be looking at the Tree of Life intervention. This is a narrative-based therapeutic intervention that uses the metaphor of a tree to allow children and young people to creatively reflect on their life stories, focusing on their individual strengths, hopes and skills. It is a positive, strengths-focused intervention that creates a safe space for the child to recognise their personal growth and resilience. By encouraging the child to highlight their accomplishments, they can identify their own capabilities and acknowledge the supportive people in their life who are there to help them, with the aim to reinforce their confidence and give them a sense of empowerment. The Tree of Life intervention draws upon narrative practice and the work of Michael White. Narrative therapy centres people as the experts of their own lives and aims to view problems as separate from the person, encouraging identification and use of one's own skills, values and characteristics in order to tackle life's problems. The Tree of Life intervention specifically was developed by Nazila Nube to help young people reflect and identify their strengths, values and support systems. This intervention was initially developed to support children who had experienced loss and trauma due to HIV and AIDS in Southern Africa. It was received so well and so successful as an intervention that it is now used all over the world in many different contexts. In many cultures, a tree is a powerful symbol of growth and healing, both physically, spiritually and mentally. And this, along with its different elements, make it an excellent metaphor to use for this intervention. In addition, it's a fairly simple concept to draw and allows children to get creative, but also not be overwhelmed by the precision of the drawing itself and rather focus on the reflection that the intervention entails. The Tree of Life intervention aims to strengthen the child and young person's relationship with their own history. This can include their culture and any significant people and places throughout their lives. We aim to do this in an interactive, collaborative and creative way, trying to promote reflection for them on what is important. We're going to think about our aims for this training session. Firstly, we are aiming to understand what the Tree of Life is and what it aims to do as an intervention. Secondly, we are aiming to learn the steps to implement the Tree of Life intervention. And finally, we are aiming to think about reflecting on the Tree of Life as an intervention. As you listen to this recorded training session today, please feel free to complete your own Tree of Life as we go along. You can pause and replay any of the audio as you please in order to complete the steps at your own pace. This will make it easier for you to understand and engage with the intervention and also enable you to reflect on the process and how you might implement this in your role, including any adaptations that you might feel are necessary. Now we're going to look at the Tree of Life process and we'll go through the intervention step by step, breaking it down. And as I mentioned, please feel free to work alongside us as we go through. So most children will understand the word tree and will have seen at least one tree in their lifetime. That being said, the first step of this intervention is to brainstorm all different types of trees. This aims to prompt their thinking and can help in providing inspiration for their own tree and also encourage them to be as creative as possible. Now, there are many ways you could do this. You could get up Google Images, you could use clip art, you could have them drawing on sort of sticky notes of paper, or for some cases it might be easier to already have images of trees cut out. Any way in which you want to do this, our aim is to just think about what a tree looks like, how they might differ, but the most important part of this step is to focus on the essential elements that a tree has. So we need to make sure that all these trees that we're thinking about have roots, a trunk, branches and either leaves or fruit or both. Once we've brainstormed all our different types of trees and we've highlighted that all trees have those essential elements that we mentioned earlier, it's now time for everybody to draw their own tree. Now again, please encourage the children to be as creative as possible and, use their imagination, let their creative spirits run wild, because we do want this to be sort of an enjoyable activity for them. So they've drawn their trees in whichever way they want. This could just be a basic outline. You might want to allow time for them to also colour it in and really make it their own. This can be as flexible as possible here, just making sure that they've all got those essential elements of the tree, as this is really important for the next steps of the intervention. It's important as well as at this stage, especially if you are delivering this as a group intervention, to emphasise to the children that throughout this activity we're going to be celebrating our individual differences as well as highlighting our similarities. We will circle back to this theme later on once the children have all completed their trees and we are sharing and reflecting on them, but it's important as well to discuss it here at the beginning of the intervention that all our trees will look different in some ways, they might be similar in others, reflecting us as individuals, and that this is something to celebrate and to be proud of. Now, thinking about this step, depending on the amount of time you've got, the group of children you're working with, or whether it's a one-to-one intervention, there are some kind of adaptations or ways to make it a bit easier. For example, it might be that if you're short on time or your group of children aren't very creative or struggle with drawing and find that a bit of an overwhelming prospect, then it might be that you provide an outline of a tree and they just colour it in, or maybe it's already filled in and so they just add on the bits as we go along. It's all about thinking what's going to work best for the child or children that you're working with and making those adaptations. It can be very flexible, so whatever works best for implementing in your role. So after drawing their trees, whether this be an outline or a fully coloured in version, everybody will take each part of the tree in turn, each of those essential elements in turn, and add their thoughts for each section. So we'll go through those one by one now. Individuals and children and yourselves can use pictures, symbols, words. It might be, again, to increase accessibility. Words might have already been printed and cut out for them, or certain images, graphics. You can do this in any way that feels accessible and inclusive for everyone. And again, it might be that you adapt these different steps depending on the group or the child that you're working with. In addition, some people still learn by listening whilst they're working on the intervention, so please allow flexibility for letting the child kind of get on and draw and write whilst you're talking. And as well, please feel free to work alongside me during this intervention and have a go at making your own tree. So the first element of the tree that we're going to be looking at is the tree roots. So what we're going to do first is think about, as a group or maybe a one-on-one discussion, depending on the scenario in which you're conducting this intervention, we're going to think about what is the purpose of the tree roots. What's the function? What do they do? What are they there for? And again, depending on the ability of the group you're working with, we can do this in many different kinds of ways. It might be a verbal discussion, it might be easier to write things down. It might be as a facilitator, you're more leading the discussion, depending on the understanding and the ability of the children in the group. So what we're trying to get out of the children to understand is that the roots are essential to the tree, as they anchor it in the soil, they help it grow, they're kind of the base, the foundation from where the tree comes from really, and how it grows and develops. So with that kind of idea in mind, look at the roots of your tree and think about your own identity. What is the most important things to you? Where do you come from? What anchors you in life? What keeps you grounded? Some of the most common things we expect to see in the roots are things like family. So, you know, this can go back as far as the child is aware. Often doesn't really go back further than grandparents, but thinking about our family, that's really where we come from, our parents, our siblings. Also things like languages they might speak, cultures they come from, what country they were born in. This can also extend to things like hobbies, sort of extracurricular activities that are really core to them and really provide that base and that foundation. Best friends, religious beliefs as well, different faiths are very common to see in the roots, and also where you live and your appearance, things that are really fundamental to you and to the child, and that's what we're trying to gauge and reflect on in the roots section. Now, if some of the children are struggling with this, please feel free to sort of ask them some prompt questions, try and gauge where their thoughts are at. So it might be things like asking them, well, where are you from? Where did you grow up? Those will hopefully initiate some of those kind of ideas of location, cultures, that kind of thing. What is your religion? And who is in your family? So those might be some kind of prompt questions that are fairly open-ended, but should try and steer the child towards reflecting on their roots as a person. The next element of the tree that we're going to focus on is the trunk. So again, it might be helpful to have a discussion either as a group or one-on-one, or maybe just for those children that need that extra prompt and support with the understanding, so that we can think about what is the purpose of a tree trunk. So we want to try and gauge the idea that the trunk provides much needed strength, it provides structure for the tree, and it's all part of the tree's growth and ability to flourish. So with that in mind, have a look at your tree trunk, and what we want to do here is try and identify skills, abilities, qualities and characteristics that you have. This could be things you're particularly good at, it could be specific things you're proud of. It might be, for example, are you a great communicator, a good listener? Perhaps you're a very bubbly person, you're able to inspire people easily, or maybe you're a good leader. Anything like that. Now, this is really the point where we're focusing on strengths. As mentioned earlier, this is a strengths-focused intervention, and we really want the young people to be able to reflect on themselves and think, what actually am I good at? What do I bring to my relationships, to my friendship, to my schoolwork? What is it, those things that I'm particularly proud of? Now, if we're thinking back to the purpose of this intervention, it might be that a lot of the children that you're working with struggle with maybe confidence and self-esteem. So it's highly likely that they might struggle with this section, as it is all around thinking about strengths and qualities and things that they're good at. So it might be that you have to just have that little bit more input in this section to help them pull out their strengths. For example, a good way to do this might be asking them first of all, well, what do you enjoy? What are your interests? What are your hobbies? Because from that, they then might be more able to think about what skills that hobby requires, and therefore that must be a skill they have. For instance, if a child is good at football, within that it might be that they're a good team player, they're decisive, they might be a good communicator, they might have good hand-eye coordination, they might be good at running, have good stamina. These will help them think more concretely about their strengths by first identifying things that they enjoy or activities that they're good at. Because for some children, it's easy to identify the things they do, and they just might need a bit more support identifying what skills that activity entails. If you find a child is really struggling to think about these and to identify any strengths or positive characteristics, it might be useful to give them a word bank. Maybe you want to print out some images for some children to think about what kind of strengths they might have, or it might be words, might be descriptors, anything like that that could sort of support and prompt their thinking. Because then they can choose from these bank of images or words and think, oh, actually, no, that is something that I'm good at, and that is something that I enjoy. Another way to try and support those children that might be struggling with this section is to think about some prompt questions to ask them to get them really thinking. So again, it might be, what are you good at? What hobbies do you have? What do you do outside of school? Starting really basic with those kinds of questions. And then another useful prompt question might be, how might a friend describe you? And again, on building on this question, if you have a whole group of children and maybe they're all struggling, it might be a nice idea to do a little side activity around them giving each person in a group a positive adjective or a compliment. And that just gets the ideas flowing about the kinds of things they can write, but also really supports that sense of confidence, empowerment, by hearing what other children in the group might think about them. Again, this is completely down to you as the facilitator to think about what might work best for the children that you have. For instance, that might be slightly trickier if they don't know each other all that well. But if you do have a group that are good friends and they spend a lot of time together, then that can be a really nice way to pull out some positive strengths and characteristics from the other children within the group. So next, we're going to think about the branches. Again, first things first is think about the purpose of branches. We want to support the idea that the branches are extensions of the tree trunk. They enable flowers, leaves, fruit to grow, develop and flourish. And so with that in mind, we want to begin to explore your support network. So here we're trying to support the young people in identifying people who are important in their lives and can help them in times of need. Now, more often than not, these will include family members, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles, whoever that might be for the young person, whoever those trusted, supportive people are. But in addition, a lot of the time we'll see friends, cousins, and also people that the young person might not have met. So they can also think about individuals who have perhaps been influential in their life, but maybe they've never met or actually engaged with. So examples of this might include something like an author. Is there a particular book they love that's really kind of given them support and courage and a new insight to life? Is it an artist? Is there a particular musician that they really connect with and that really helps them get through, times of struggle or difficult periods? So anything like that are also perfectly acceptable to go on the branches. Again, the support network might also include individuals who have passed away. Quite often the young people might want to put grandparents on there that aren't with us anymore, or even different relatives or people that they know, because often these people have played an impact in that child's life, and sometimes the scenario of them passing away in itself has had an impact on that child, and so it's really something important to reflect on. So last but not least, we are focusing on the leaves and the fruit on the trees. So again, what do these represent? Have that discussion around what is their purpose, what do they mean to the child, what do they represent in the child's life? So what we want to think about is that leaves and fruit grow over time. So here we're thinking about hopes, dreams, wishes, aspirations, all those kinds of things. What do the children want to achieve? In addition, you might find it useful to connect these dreams and aspirations and hopes to the people in the branches or the different strengths on the trunk. For example, a child moving from year 6 to 7 might write friendship on a leaf. So they want to connect with people in their new school. They want to build those really positive friendships. And then it might be thinking about existing friends they've already got to help support with that, or strengths that they have as a person that would help develop those friendships. So is it that they're a particularly kind person? So we're linking back now to the other parts of the tree that can help those wishes and aspirations to develop. Another example might be a young person might like more contact with a particular family member. And so again, that's thinking about which family member might that be? Is there another family member that can support me with that? What kind of characteristics does that young person have to help them to remember to stay in contact with that family member? So some prompt questions for this element of the tree might be asking, what are your hopes? What are your dreams? Where would you like to be in the future? What would you like to be one day? What would you like your life to look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time, whatever it may be? And again, if it helps for the young people, maybe you have a word bank on the table, or a bank of images or graphics that give them some ideas of different kinds of aspirations or different things that they might hope for. So we have now gone through each element of the tree individually. So up here on the slide, we've got an example of what that tree now might look like. Of course, remembering that the young people could be as creative as possible, their tree might look completely different to this, which is absolutely fine as long as they've got those main 4 elements. It might be that after they've done the main part of this and they've written all their labels or used pictures, if that's more helpful, they might want to go ahead and add some more creative elements to it. So you can see the example on the screen. We've got a little squirrel sitting in the tree, a woodpecker, some flowers. So it might be nice now to give them a chance to really add a bit of a creative flair, give them a bit of downtime to add to their tree and make it their own and make it as colourful and bright as they wish. Now, it might be that you've been completing your own tree as we've gone through this presentation, and if so, now might be a helpful time to reflect on that process. How did you find it? Was it easy or difficult? Were certain elements a bit easier to think about? Where did you struggle? And how might you want to adapt this intervention for your own children that you're working with? So once all the trees are drawn and completed, it's time for the forest ceremony. So it's important to find a place somewhere within school to display these trees. This might be in the classroom, the school canteen, it might be in a nurture room or a corridor on a display board, wherever they can be viewed and appreciated. These can create incredibly beautiful and striking displays, especially when all the trees are put together, and importantly, it can visually promote a sense of safety and belonging within your setting. So during this forest ceremony, you might want to have the children come up and pin their tree to the display themselves, giving that sense of ownership and belonging, seeing their tree amongst all their peers. And in addition, if certain children want to share with the group whilst they're doing this, maybe they want to highlight a particular element or a particular hope or dream or strength, any part of their tree that maybe they want to share and reflect with as a group, they can absolutely do this. However, there's no requirement to do this, as some children may find this a bit too personal to share with the group as a whole, and that's fine as well. What is important to remember is it's the child's own thoughts and reflections that are the most important part, whether or not they share that with the group. As well, when a new child joins the school, a new tree is planted and a ceremony should take place to mark this occasion. If the intervention is done as a whole class, then the ceremony for the new student takes place as a whole class, and so on. So again, it's about emphasising that sense of belonging within the community. So that's it for the Tree of Life intervention. We've gone through all the steps and now it's your turn to put it into action. Please feel free to give it a go in your school community and see what happens. If you'd like to arrange a follow-up visit after this training session to monitor the fidelity of the intervention and to ensure it's being implemented correctly, or just to ask some questions or clarification on anything we've spoken about today, then the best way to do this would be to contact your Link EP in the first instance, and something can be arranged from there. If you're unsure of who your settings Link EP is, then your Senko should be able to help with this. Thank you so much for listening today.